Welcome to Crust Issues. I'm Ryan Nausieda. Today's episode is about focused bread baking tips. The next couple episodes, I'm going to try some different formats and see what works best for the audience and what people enjoy. But in today's first episode, we're going to be covering using a scale for consistency, managing temperature with a thermometer, and storing yeast in the freezer. And today I have a special guest. His name is Winston Nausieda, and he's 13 years old, and he is a professional baker. Is that correct?
No.
All right, what parts are correct? What parts are correct?
My name and my age.
Okay, what about your profession?
I'm 13, so I don't have a job.
Okay, fair enough. He's not a professional baker, and in fact, he's helped me a couple times, but you don't really spend that much time in the kitchen, do you?
Not really.
No. So he has some interest, and I thought he would be the perfect guest because I could teach him a couple things about baking. And it's kind of fun just to look at these different tools and see how they really add to the experience. We don't want to just buy tools just to have them in our kitchen, but if they're going to make the experience ever so slightly easier, why not go for it and do it?
Yeah.
The number one tool that I believe everyone needs, and we're going to right now, is the most important upgrade for any baker is
The measure.
the measure thing, also known as the digital scale.
Yeah.
I like that, the measure thing. When you measure flour with cups, it can change the variation on the grams that you're using. So if you use a cup and you scoop it down into the flour, it could pack down. And that's going to change the consistency of your bread.
It's going to be less like poofy and more like stiff.
Yeah, more dense. And depending on how you scoop, that can throw off the hydration. And a digital scale guarantees the same amount every single time. Yeah. And so it's really...
Very accurate.
You have to be very accurate because baking is a science, and sometimes science throws people off because they want baking to be a relaxing thing. But we have to use the tools that we have, and baking accuracy is important. So what we're going to do first is we're going to do a little demonstration. We have the scale in front of us with the containers. And so can you describe the buttons that are on there, at least the two that we've talked about?
There's the tare button, which brings it back down to 0. And then there's the on and off button.
Yeah, exactly. So there's the big red button, which turns the scale on and off. And then there's the mode button, which changes back. You can change it from grams to ounces to other things. But I always keep it on grams because it's a very accurate way to measure. So let's test it out once. So why don't you turn it on?
Oh, okay. Gotta put that up and then there.
Okay, so you press the big red button.
Yeah.
It does say 0, but let's hit tare one time just to make sure that it is at 0. And then why don't you put in 50 grams of flour?
Okay.
So he's grabbing this big blue bag of flour.
50?
Yeah, do 50.
20, 30. Almost there. 60.
Okay, so that's great because with flour, it's easiest to go over with the first ingredient because you can just take a spoon, take out 10 grams of flour, put it back in the bag. So after the first ingredient's in, why don't you hit tare again and tell people what that does?
The tare button resets the weight back to 0.
Yeah. So now that we're back to 0, why don't you add 25 grams of water? What are we at? 15.
Just a little bit more. 23.
23. Okay, perfect. And then we can continue down the line. So the nice part is you can tare it again, put the salt in, tare it again, put the yeast in. So let's say a recipe calls for 500 grams of flour, 350 grams of water. 10 grams of yeast, or 10 grams of salt, 3 grams of yeast. So you know that the measurements are spot on this way. Another few tips are make sure that your scale is on a flat surface. Watch for battery or calibration issues. Some scales can drift over time. I do like to test it every once in a while, and I also like to tare it frequently to make sure that it does go back to zero with each ingredient and at the start. So next up, we're going to be talking about the next big factor in bread baking, and that is temperature. Oh, the thermometer's on the refrigerator. Let's grab that really quick. So we have the thermometer here, and see, this is an instant read probe thermometer.
It has a retractable needle. There's a button where you can retract it, and there's an on and off button, and there's a little screen where it shows the temperature.
Yeah. So this is a really important tool because yeast thrives at around 95 to 110 degrees. If your water's too cold, fermentation slows. It'll take forever for your bread to rise. If it's too hot, you'll kill the yeast. And that's...
You can die?
I know, right? It's alive. And that's why a thermometer is great, because you want to make sure that there's no more guessing and, you know, that you're moving in the right direction. Occasionally check it. I'm going to have you check that glass of water right there.
Gonna put it in here.
All right, he's testing it. He has the thermometer in the water. And what are we reading at?
67.3 Fahrenheit.
Okay. So if we used 67.3 degrees in baking, what would the yeast do?
It would ferment very slowly.
It would ferment slowly. Very good. Some bakers also track dough temperature, but water is the easiest way to control temperature. Often what I'll do is while I'm getting the water out to put into a container, I'll run the pen under the water, and I'll be reading the temperature of the water while it's running. If it's too hot, I'll turn it a little bit cold. If it's too cold, I'll turn it a little bit hot until it gets to right where I want to be. And then I fill my container, double check. If in the container it's too hot, I can still add a little bit of cold water in there. Yeah. That way the temperature of the water is perfect and ready to use. So between weighing your ingredients and managing temperature precisely, you've eliminated two major variables that trip up new bakers. So let's talk about yeast itself. All right, can you grab the yeast out of the freezer, please? Perfect.
Got it right here.
Excellent.
There.
So we have our yeast container from the freezer. Storing yeast in the freezer drastically extends its shelf life, and it's perfect if you buy it in bulk. I usually buy it in a 1-pound bag. From Costco. I bought an airtight container that I could put in the freezer, and I dumped the 1-pound bag of yeast. And I keep a special spoon right in the yeast container. The spoon is designed to essentially be the same amount as one of the packets that you buy at the store. So it's 2 1/4 teaspoons of yeast. And it's convenient. I never have to worry about over a year whether I have yeast in the house or not. It's nice knowing that I always have it here. So after scooping the yeast, I seal the container immediately, and you can let it warm up briefly or dissolve in warm water. It depends on what the recipe is actually calling for. But I usually just put it in cold straight from the freezer, and I've never had any issues. It's always done its job and made wonderful baked goods. So no more tiny packets.
Good.
Congratulations.
We buy stuff in bulk.
Yeah, we buy stuff in bulk. So fresh, reliable yeast whenever you need it. You can pair it with the scale for perfect measurements, and you're all set. So with these tools and ingredients prepped, you have the scale, you have the probe thermometer, and you have the yeast. These are 3 essential tools that I'm excited to bring to you today. Thank you, Winston, for helping us out.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Have a good day.
I love you.